My greedy daughter-in-law said, "You're not going to live for free under my roof. Just sign the house transfer." The next day I packed my bags. $500,000, destined to my caregiver. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought I'd hear those words from someone I had welcomed into my family with open arms. My name is Edna, and at 73, I believed I'd seen enough of life to know when someone was genuine. But Fallon? She proved me wrong in the cruelest way possible. It all started 3 months ago when I took that terrible fall in my bathroom. The house, the beautiful 2-story colonial that Walter and I had saved for decades to build, suddenly felt like a trap. The stairs I once climbed without thinking became mountains. The bathtub where I'd nearly cracked my skull became a daily reminder of my fragility. "Mom, you can't stay here alone anymore," Graham said, his face etched with genuine concern. My son has always been gentle-hearted, just like his father. "Fallon and I have plenty of room, just until you're back on your feet." I didn't want to leave my home. Every corner held memories of Walter, the kitchen where he'd surprise me with coffee, on Sunday mornings, the living room where we'd dance to old records, the garden we'd tended together for 30 years. But Graham was right. I couldn't manage alone, not anymore. "It's temporary," I assured myself as I packed a small suitcase. "Just until I can hire some help." The first few weeks at Graham and Fallon's house weren't terrible. Their home was modern, all sleek surfaces and minimal decoration. Nothing like my cozy lived-in space. Fallon kept everything spotless, making me feel like an intruder every time I left a cup on the counter or a book on the sofa. "Mother, we have coasters for a reason," she'd say with that tight smile of hers. I'd apologize and remind myself to be grateful. I tried to contribute where I could. I cooked meals when my hip wasn't hurting too badly. I minded their cat when they went out. I even offered to pay rent, but Graham wouldn't hear of it. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. We're family." Family. The word used to bring me comfort. Everything changed when I mentioned hiring a part-time caregiver so I could return to my own home. We were having dinner, a roast I'd prepared despite the pain in my hip. I thought it might soften the blow of my departure. "I've been looking into some help," I said carefully. "Marlene, you remember her from church? She's working as a home health aide now. She could come by a few times a week." The silence that followed was deafening. Fallon set down her fork with a deliberate clink against the china. "You want to go back to that big empty house? At your age?" She exchanged a look with Graham that made my stomach tighten. "It's my home," I said simply. "Mom, we've been talking," Graham started, not meeting my eyes. "That house is too much for you now. The stairs, the maintenance. We think you should consider selling it," Fallon finished, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "You could stay here permanently. We'd love to have you." The way she said it, without warmth, without sincerity, sent a chill through me. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not ready to sell. "That house is all I have left of your father." I looked at Graham, willing him to understand. "Don't be sentimental, Edna," Fallon said, dropping the pretense of sweetness. "It's just a house. And frankly, it's an asset that's sitting there empty. While you're here." Graham shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. This wasn't the first time he'd stayed silent when Fallon spoke harshly to me. "I've made up my mind," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm going home next week." That night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom. Graham's voice was pleading, Fallon's sharp and insistent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, Fallon cornered me in the kitchen. Graham had already left for work, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. "Let me be direct, Edna," she said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed over her expensive silk blouse. Graham and I have been carrying the burden of your care for months now. It's affecting our marriage, our finances, our peace of mind. I opened my mouth to remind her it had only been 8 weeks and that I'd contributed in every way I could, but she cut me off. You won't live for free under my roof. Sign the house transfer now. Her eyes were cold, calculating. We need that property for our future, for our retirement. The shock of her words left me breathless. This woman, who had married my only child, who had been part of my family for 15 years, was demanding I sign over my home, the home Walter and I had scraped and saved for, the home where Graham had grown up, as payment for 8 weeks of reluctant hospitality. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked to the guest room where I'd been staying. With hands that trembled slightly, I began to pack my bags. The next morning, when Graham had left for work and Fallon was at her yoga class, I called a taxi. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone home. Don't worry about me. Love, Mom. What I didn't tell them was that I wasn't going back to my house. Not yet. And I certainly didn't tell them about the $500,000 that Walter had left me. Money that not even Graham knew about. Money that, after last night, I had decided would never go to them. The taxi driver gave me a concerned look through the rearview mirror as I settled into the back seat, my small suitcase and tote bag beside me. You all right, ma'am? He asked, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. You look like you've had a rough morning. I managed a weak smile. Just a change of plans, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Could you take me to 437 Maple Street, please? As we pulled away from Graham and Fallon's pristine suburban home, I didn't look back. The weight of Fallon's words, "You won't live for free under my roof," still pressed against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. How could someone be so callous? And how had I missed the signs for all these years? The taxi wound through familiar streets, passing the grocery store where I'd shopped for decades, the park where I'd pushed Graham on the swings as a toddler, the church where I'd said goodbye to Walter 5 years ago. My life in this town stretched back nearly 50 years, yet suddenly I felt like a stranger. Here we are, ma'am, the driver announced, pulling up to a modest apartment complex. I paid him, adding a generous tip that made him smile, and gathered my belongings. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I made my way to apartment 3B and knocked. Marlene opened the door, her round face registering surprise and then concern. Edna, what in the world? She looked at my suitcase, then back at my face. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Come in. Come in. Marlene had been my nurse when I was recovering from my hip replacement 2 years ago. Since then, she'd become something more, a friend, a confidant, someone who checked in on me regularly. When I mentioned needing a caregiver after my fall, she'd immediately offered her services. I hope I'm not imposing, I said as she ushered me inside her small but tidy apartment. I didn't know where else to go. Don't you dare apologize, Marlene said firmly, taking my bag. You're always welcome here. Now sit down and tell me what happened. Over cups of strong tea, I told her everything. The fall, moving in with Graham and Fallon, and finally, Fallon's ultimatum. Marlene's expression darkened as I spoke. That woman, she muttered, shaking her head, always thought she had dollar signs where her heart should be. I just can't go back there, I said, my voice finally breaking, and I'm not ready to go home alone. Then you'll stay here, Marlene declared, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. I've got a pull-out sofa that's surprisingly comfortable. We'll figure out next steps when you're feeling stronger. The relief that washed over me was so intense I nearly wept. I can pay you, I began, but Marlene waved me off. We'll sort all that out later. Right now you need rest. My phone began to ring, Graham's ringtone. I stared at it, torn between maternal instinct and self-preservation. You don't have to answer, Marlene said gently. But I did. Because no matter what, he was still my son. Mom, where are you? Graham's voice was tight with worry. I came home for lunch and found your note. What do you mean you've gone home? I drove by the house and you're not there. I'm safe, I said, choosing my words carefully. I'm staying with a friend for a while. Is this because of what Fallon said? He asked, lowering his voice. So he knew. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. She's just stressed about finances lately. Did she ask me to sign over my house, Graham? I asked directly. A pause. She shouldn't have put it that way. We're just concerned about your safety, living alone in that big house. And yes, we could use the help financially, but that's not the main reason. Graham, I interrupted, I raised you to be honest. Please don't insult me by lying now. Another pause, longer this time. Can we talk about this in person? Please tell me where you are. Not today, I said firmly. I need some time to think. Mom, please? I'll call you tomorrow, I promised. Then ended the call before my resolve could weaken. Marlene gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You did good standing your ground. My phone buzzed with a text from Graham. Fallon wants to apologize. She feels terrible. Please come back. I turned off my phone. That evening, as I settled onto Marlene's pull-out sofa, surrounded by borrowed nightclothes and toiletries, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time since my fall, I wasn't walking on eggshells, wasn't measuring my words, wasn't feeling like a burden. You know, Marlene said, as she brought me an extra blanket. I've been thinking about getting a roommate anyway. This place is too big for just me, and fixed incomes don't stretch as far as they used to. I knew what she was doing, giving me a way to stay without feeling like a charity case, and I appreciated it more than I could say. I'd need to contribute, I insisted. Pay my fair share. We'll work it out, she promised. That's what friends do? The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find 8 missed calls from Graham and 3 from Fallon. There were multiple texts, each more urgent than the last. Mom, please call me. I'm worried sick. Edna, I'm so sorry for what I said. Please come back so we can talk. Mom, if I don't hear from you by noon, I'm calling the police. That last one made me sigh. I called him immediately. Mom. Thank God. Relief flooded his voice. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm fine, Graham. I'm staying with Marlene. Your old nurse? Why didn't you tell me? I've been out of my mind with worry. I needed some space, I said simply. Fallon feels awful, he continued. She was way out of line. We don't want your house, Mom. We just want you to be safe. I closed my eyes, remembering the cold calculation in Fallon's eyes as she'd issued her ultimatum. That hadn't been a momentary lapse. That had been the real Fallon, finally showing herself. Graham, I said carefully, I love you. But I'm not coming back right now. Mom, I need you to respect my decision. A long silence. Then, his voice smaller. Are you ever coming back? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. Was I cutting ties with my only child because of my daughter-in-law's cruelty? Of course I am, I said softly. You're my son. I just need some time. After we hung up, I sat on Marlene's couch, staring at the wall. My life had been upended in the span of 24 hours. Yet, strangely, beneath the hurt and anger, I felt something else stirring, a sense of possibility. For 5 years since Walter's death, I'd been existing, not living. Maybe this upheaval, painful as it was the push I needed to truly start again. My phone buzzed with a text from Fallon. "The house is the least of our concerns. We just want you back. Name your terms." I set the phone down without replying. Fallon hadn't changed overnight. She was just changing tactics, and I wasn't playing her game anymore. 2 weeks into my stay with Marlene, I was beginning to find my footing again. We had fallen into an easy rhythm, sharing morning coffee, dividing household chores according to my physical limitations, watching British mysteries in the evening. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it had a comfort all its own. I'd spoken to Graham several times, keeping our conversations light, deflecting his pleas for me to return. Fallon had tried calling twice, but I let those go to voicemail, not yet ready to hear her honeyed apologies. "You can't avoid her forever," Marlene pointed out one morning as she noticed me silencing yet another call from Fallon. "I'm not avoiding her forever," I said, setting my phone face down on the table. "Just until I figure out what I want to do next." What I wanted to do was complicated. I missed my house terribly. The familiar creaks of the floorboards, the way sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows in the morning, the garden that would be overrun with weeds by now. But I couldn't return without help, and I wasn't ready to face Fallon's barely concealed resentment again. That afternoon, Marlene had a doctor's appointment, leaving me alone in the apartment. Restless, I decided to venture out for a walk. First solo outing since the fall. The May sunshine was warm on my face as I made my way slowly down the street, my cane providing the stability I still needed. I had only gone a block when I heard someone calling my name. Turning, I saw Margaret Wilson hurrying toward me, her silver bob bouncing with each step. Margaret and I had been in the same garden club for 20 years before Walter's death pulled me away from social activities. "Edna Miller, where on earth have you been hiding?" she exclaimed, embracing me carefully. "We've all been wondering about you." Before I knew it, Margaret had ushered me to a nearby cafe where 3 other women from our old circle were having lunch. The reunion was unexpectedly emotional. These women had been fixtures in my life for decades, yet I'd drifted away without realizing how much I'd missed them. "We heard you moved in with Graham and that daughter-in-law of yours," said Betty, always the most direct of the group. "How's that working out?" I hesitated, not wanting to air family problems, but something in their concerned faces broke my reserve. Perhaps it was the weight of carrying my hurt alone, or perhaps it was simply the comfort of old friends who had known me when I was more than just Graham's mother or Walter's widow. "Not well," I admitted, and found myself telling them everything. The fall, Fallon's ultimatum, my hasty departure, and my current living arrangement with Marlene. "That little gold digger?" snorted Betty, her face flushing with indignation. "I never did like the way she looked at you, like you were an inconvenience she had to tolerate." "Betty!" chided Alice, always the peacemaker. "We shouldn't speak ill of Edna's family." "It's not speaking ill if it's the truth," Betty insisted. "And Edna deserves to hear the truth after what that woman tried to pull." "What do you mean?" I asked, suddenly alert. The women exchanged glances. "You didn't know?" Margaret asked gently. "Fallon's been spreading stories for years about how you're struggling financially, how your memory is slipping, how Graham has to help you manage your affairs." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cafe's air conditioning. "That's not true. Any of it." "We know that," said Ruth, patting my hand. "But Fallon's been laying groundwork, making it seem like you're no longer capable of living independently. People talk, Edna. And Fallon knows exactly what to say to make them believe her." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about my house. This was about control, about creating a narrative where my declining health justified their actions. "Has Graham been part of this?" I asked, dreading the answer. "No," Margaret said firmly. "At least not that we've seen. He always speaks of you with nothing but respect and concern. That was some comfort, at least. As our impromptu lunch stretched into the afternoon, I found myself remembering how it felt to be among peers, women who saw me as a whole person, not just an aging mother who needed management. We laughed about old garden club disasters, remembered friends who had passed, and caught up on neighborhood gossip. When I finally returned to Marlene's apartment, my heart felt lighter despite the troubling revelations about Fallon. I had friends. I had a history in this town that predated my daughter-in-law's arrival. And I had resources she knew nothing about. That evening, after Marlene returned, I made a decision. I need to go to the bank tomorrow, I told her. Would you mind coming with me? The next morning, we took a taxi to First National Bank, where Walter and I had been customers for over 40 years. Inside, I asked to speak with Mr. Jenkins, the manager who had handled our accounts since before Walter's passing. Mrs. Miller. What a pleasure. He greeted me warmly, ushering us into his office. It's been too long. How can I help you today? I need to check on an account, I said, straightening my shoulders. The one Walter set up before he died. The special one. Mr. Jenkins nodded knowingly. Of course. Let me pull up that information for you. Walter had always been cautious with money, a trait born from growing up during the Depression. When he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he had insisted on making arrangements to ensure my financial security. You never know what might happen. Edna, he said, holding my hand in his hospital bed. Promise me you'll keep this just for you. Not for Graham, not for emergencies. This is your safety net. I had promised, then filed the information away in my grief after his passing, rarely thinking about the substantial sum he'd tucked away for me. Mr. Jenkins turned his computer screen so I could see it. There it was, $513,278.49. The original $500,000 plus interest, untouched for 5 years. Everything appears to be in order, Mrs. Miller, he said. Would you like to make any changes to the account? I thought of Fallon's cold eyes, of the stories she'd been spreading, of her attempt to take my house. Yes, I said firmly. I'd like to update the beneficiary information. For years, Graham had been listed as the sole beneficiary of all my assets. It had seemed natural. He was my only child, my family. But now, with clear eyes, I recognized the need for caution. I'd like to designate Marlene Carter as the beneficiary of this specific account, I said, feeling Marlene stiffen beside me, in surprise. Edna. No, she whispered. That's your son's inheritance. I squeezed her hand. Graham will inherit the house and everything else. But this money, this is for the person who's truly been there for me when I needed it most. As we left the bank, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. I wasn't cutting Graham out of my life or my legacy, but I was protecting myself and acknowledging the painful truth that sometimes family isn't defined by blood, but by actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Graham. Mom, we need to talk. Fallon's planning a family dinner this Sunday. Please come. We both miss you. I stared at the screen, remembering Margaret's words about Fallon's campaign to undermine me. What was she planning now? Are you going to go? Marlene asked, reading the message over my shoulder. Yes, I said slowly. But not alone, and not as the helpless old woman they think I am. It was time to reclaim my narrative and my life. Sunday arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing my most flattering dress, a deep blue that Walter always said brought out my eyes, and the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 40th anniversary. If I was walking into the lion's den, I would do so with dignity. Remember, Marlene said as she drove us to Graham and Fallon's house, you don't have to stay if things get uncomfortable. Just text me and I'll come right back. I nodded, grateful for her support. We'd agreed that she would drop me off and return in 2 hours. Long enough for dinner, but not so long that I'd feel trapped. And remember what Mr. Jenkins said, she added, referring to our follow-up meeting with the banker. Your finances are private. You don't have to discuss them with anyone, even family. The advice had been clear. Don't reveal the existence of the special account. Don't mention the changes to my will, and don't sign anything without legal review. Graham opened the door before I could knock, his face lighting up with genuine relief. Mom, you came! He embraced me warmly, then noticed Marlene in the car. Isn't Marlene joining us? She has other plans, I said smoothly. She'll pick me up in a couple of hours. A flash of disappointment crossed his face, but he quickly recovered. Well, come in. Fallon's been cooking all day. The house smelled wonderful. Roast chicken, fresh bread, apple pie. All my favorites. Fallon emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron, her hair perfectly styled despite the hours of cooking. Edna, she exclaimed, coming forward to embrace me. I'm so glad you came. We've missed you terribly. Her performance was flawless. Warm smile, gentle touch on my arm, eyes brimming with what looked like genuine affection. If I hadn't heard her cruel words with my own ears, I might have been fooled. Thank you for inviting me, I said politely. Let me take your coat, she offered. Graham, why don't you get your mother a glass of wine? The white she likes. As Graham disappeared into the kitchen, Fallon's smile remained fixed, but her eyes turned calculating. You look well, Edna. Better than when you left us. Marlene has been taking good care of me, I replied evenly. Ah, yes. Marlene. Her tone suggested she found the arrangement distasteful. Well, we're hoping you'll reconsider your situation. This is your home too, you know. Graham returned with my wine before I could respond, and Fallon seamlessly shifted back into the role of doting daughter-in-law. Dinner was a masterclass in manipulation. Fallon served dish after dish of my favorites, reminisced about happy family moments, and repeatedly touched my hand or arm in a show of affection. Graham seemed genuinely pleased to have me there, though I noticed he deferred to Fallon at every turn, watching her for cues on what to say or do next. We've been thinking, Fallon said as she served dessert, about how to make things better for everyone. Here it comes, I thought. We feel terrible about what happened, she continued, her voice dripping with remorse. I was stressed about money. Graham's company is going through some changes, and I said things I didn't mean. Graham nodded eagerly. We never wanted your house, Mom. We just want to make sure you're safe and happy. Exactly, Fallon agreed. And living with Marlene. Well, it's not a long-term solution, is it? She's not family. She's been very kind to me, I said carefully. Of course she has, Fallon said with a dismissive wave. But you belong here, with us, with your son. The emotional manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. Yet I could see Graham believed every word, his eyes pleading with me to agree. We've even thought about converting the den into a bedroom for you, he added. So you wouldn't have to use the stairs. That's very thoughtful, I murmured, taking a sip of wine to hide my expression. So you'll come back? Fallon pressed, a hint of impatience breaking through her solicitous facade. I need some time to think about it, I hedged. It's a big decision. Fallon's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Take all the time you need. After dessert, Graham suggested we move to the living room for coffee. As I stood to help clear the dishes, Fallon insisted I relax. You're our guest tonight, she said, though I noticed she had no problem letting Graham help. Left. Alone for a moment, I decided to use the bathroom. As I passed by the partially open door of the home office, I heard Fallon's hushed voice. Just need more time. She's being stubborn. Curiosity overrode my better judgment, and I paused, listening. "Are you sure about this?" asked a male voice I didn't recognize. "The lawyer said—" "I know what the lawyer said," Fallon hissed. "But if she agrees to move back in, we can establish the dependency much faster. Once she's here, we can show she can't manage on her own. Then the conservatorship will be easy." My blood ran cold. Conservatorship? They were planning to have me. Declared incompetent? "And the house?" the male voice asked. "Once we have legal control, selling it will be the first order of business. The market's hot right now. We could get at least $800,000 for it." "What about Graham? He seems to think this is just about his mother's safety." Fallon's laugh was brittle. "Graham sees what he wants to see. He'll go along with whatever I say is best for Mother." I backed away silently, my heart pounding. The depths of Fallon's deception were worse than I'd imagined. And Graham, my sweet, trusting son, was being manipulated just as much as I was. When I returned to the living room, I forced myself to smile and accept the coffee Graham offered. Fallon joined us moments later, accompanied by a man she introduced as Carson, our financial advisor. The same voice I'd heard in the office. "Carson was just leaving," Fallon said smoothly, but his eyes lingered on me with an assessing look that made my skin crawl. The conversation turned to innocuous topics: neighborhood news, an upcoming community festival, Graham's work. I participated mechanically, my mind racing with what I'd overheard. When the doorbell rang, announcing Marlene's arrival, I felt a rush of relief so intense it was almost dizzying. "So soon?" Fallon asked with exaggerated disappointment. "We were hoping you'd stay longer, maybe even overnight?" "Another time, perhaps," I said, rising carefully to my feet. "Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." Graham walked me to the door, his face troubled. "Mom, I hope you'll think about coming back. It's not the same without you." I reached up to touch his cheek, my heart aching for the little boy who used to believe I could fix anything. "I'll think about it," I promised. But we both knew I meant something different than he did. In the safety of Marlene's car, I finally allowed myself to tremble. "They're planning to get a conservatorship over me," I told her, my voice barely above a whisper. "They want to declare me incompetent so they can sell my house." Marlene's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Over my dead body," she said fiercely. "We're calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow." As we drove away from the house where my son lived with a woman who was plotting to strip me of my autonomy, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were now joined by something stronger: determination. Fallon. Thought I was a helpless old woman she could manipulate and discard. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my 73 years, it's that you should never underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. "Absolutely not," said Patricia Winters, the elder law attorney Marlene had found for me. "There's no grounds for a conservatorship in your case, Mrs. Miller. You're mentally sound, you have support systems in place, and you're managing your own affairs capably." We sat in her office the Monday morning after the disastrous dinner at Graham and Fallon's house. The office was warm and inviting, with comfortable chairs and framed diplomas that testified to Patricia's expertise. But could they try anyway? I asked, the worry that had kept me awake all night still gnawing at me. Patricia leaned forward, her gray eyes serious behind stylish glasses. They could try. Unscrupulous attorneys sometimes take these cases knowing they're shaky. It's distressingly common when property or assets are involved. My stomach tightened. How do I stop them? First, we document your competence. I'll arrange for a geriatric assessment, cognitive tests, evaluation of your ability to manage daily living tasks, the works. We'll get letters from your doctor confirming your mental fitness. She made notes as she spoke, her handwriting neat and decisive. Second, we create a durable power of attorney naming someone you trust, not Graham, to make decisions if you ever become incapacitated. This demonstrates you've already planned responsibly for your future. Marlene, I said without hesitation. I want Marlene to have my power of attorney. Beside me, Marlene squeezed my hand. Are you sure, Edna? That's a big responsibility. I've never been more sure of anything, I replied. The past weeks had shown me who truly had my best interests at heart. Patricia nodded. Good. Third, we update your will and create a trust for your assets. This makes it harder for anyone to claim you're not managing your affairs properly. What about my house? I asked. I can't live there alone anymore. Not with my hip, but I don't want to sell it. You have options, Patricia assured me. Renting it out would provide income while preserving ownership. Or you could consider a reverse mortgage to fund in-home care. My head spun with possibilities I'd never considered. For years, I'd seen only two choices: struggle alone or depend on family. Now a whole world of alternatives was opening up. What about Graham? I asked, my heart heavy. He's being manipulated by Fallon. I don't want to lose my son. Patricia's expression softened. That's the hardest part of these situations. Sometimes setting boundaries with one family member means strain with others. But if Graham's being misled, the truth is, your best ally. Should I confront them? Tell them I know about their plan? Not yet, Patricia advised. Right now, knowledge is your power. Let's get all our legal protections in place first. Then we can decide how to approach them. As we left the attorney's office with a list of next steps and a follow-up appointment scheduled, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I had a plan. I had protection. I wasn't powerless. Thank you, I told Marlene as we drove back to her apartment. For everything. She glanced at me, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. That's what friends are for, Edna. Besides, watching you stand up for yourself is the most inspiring thing I've seen in years. Over the next 2 weeks, I followed Patricia's advice methodically. I underwent a comprehensive geriatric assessment, which I passed with flying colors. Your cognitive function is above average for your age group, the specialist told me with a smile. I'd say you're sharper than many of my 50-year-old patients. I established a durable power of attorney naming Marlene as my representative. I updated my will, creating a trust for the house that would allow Graham to inherit it eventually, but prevent it from being sold without my explicit consent. And I consulted with a financial advisor about my options for the $500,000 that Walter had left me. Throughout this flurry of activity, I maintained sporadic, pleasant contact with Graham. I answered his calls, shared mundane details about my days, but deflected any pressure to move back in with them. When Fallon called, I was polite, but distant, giving her nothing she could use against me. I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn, Edna, she said during one particularly tense call. We have plenty of room and Graham misses you terribly. I appreciate your concern, I replied evenly, but I'm quite content with my current arrangement. With a hired nurse? Her contempt leaked through despite her efforts to sound concerned. That's hardly family, is it? Marlene is a dear friend who happens to be a nurse, I corrected her. And family comes in many forms, Fallon. The conversation ended shortly after, with Fallon barely concealing her frustration. Good, I thought as I hung up. Let her wonder why her tactics aren't working. Meanwhile, a new idea had been taking shape in my mind, sparked by conversations with Patricia and my financial advisor. It was bold, perhaps even risky, but the more I thought about it, the more right it felt. Want to go home? I told Marlene one evening as we shared a pot of tea. To my house, She looked surprised. Are you sure? Patricia said. I know what Patricia said about waiting, I interrupted gently. But I've been thinking, that house isn't just property to me. It's where Walter and I built our life together. It's where we raised Graham. I don't want to abandon it. But you're hip. That's where my idea comes in, I said, excitement creeping into my voice. What if you moved in with me? Not as my nurse, but as my housemate. The place is too big for just me, but for two people. Marlene's eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. You said yourself that your apartment is getting too expensive on your fixed income. My house is paid off. You'd pay minimal rent, just enough to cover utilities and your share of expenses. In exchange, I'd have company and someone nearby if I need help. But what about Fallon and Graham? Won't this complicate things? I smiled, feeling a confidence I hadn't experienced in years. That's partly the point. They've been creating a narrative that I'm helpless, that I need them to survive. By going home, on my terms, with support I've arranged myself, I'm taking back control of my story. Marlene considered this, then slowly nodded. It's a bold move, Edna, but I think you're right. And honestly, I've been worried about my rent increasing again next year. Then you'll do it? I'll do it, she agreed. But we should talk to Patricia first. Make sure we're not walking into a legal minefield. Patricia approved the plan with a few caveats. Don't move back until all our legal protections are in place, she advised. And don't tell Graham and Fallon until the last minute. If they're planning a conservatorship, we don't want to give them time to file before we're ready. So we prepared quietly. I hired a cleaning service to refresh the house that had stood empty for months. I arranged for a handyman to install grab bars in the bathrooms and a ramp over the 2 steps at the front entrance. Marlene gave notice on her apartment and began packing her belongings. Meanwhile, Fallon's calls became more frequent, her tone more desperate. We really need to talk about your living situation, Edna, she insisted. Graham and I have some concerns about your future. Kara, I knew what those concerns were now, and the thought of how close I'd come to falling into their trap made me shudder. Actually, I said, making a split-second decision, I've been thinking about that too. Why don't you both come to Marlene's for dinner tomorrow night? We can discuss everything then. Fallon agreed immediately, clearly thinking her plan was finally working. Little did she know that I had a plan of my own, one that would change everything. As I hung up, Marlene raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you're ready for this confrontation? I nodded, a sense of calm determination settling over me. It's time to reclaim my life, all of it. The dinner table in Marlene's apartment was set for 4, the china borrowed from my house gleaming under the soft lighting. I'd insisted on cooking myself, pot roast with all the trimmings, Walter's favorite recipe that I'd made countless Sunday dinners. You're remarkably calm, Marlene observed as I arranged fresh flowers in the center of the table. I'd be a nervous wreck. I've said everything I needed to say in my head 100 times, I replied. Now it's just a matter of saying it out loud. The doorbell rang precisely at 6:30. Graham and Fallon stood on the threshold, he with a bottle of wine, she with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mom? Graham said warmly, embracing me. You look wonderful. Thank you, dear. Come in, both of you. Fallon's gaze swept the apartment, taking in the modest furnishings with barely concealed disdain. Quaint, she murmured, handing me a small gift bag. Just a little something to brighten up the place. Inside was a framed photo of Graham and Fallon on their wedding day. I thanked her politely and set it aside. Dinner began pleasantly enough. We discussed neutral topics: the weather, a new restaurant in town, Graham's work. But as I served dessert, Fallon leaned forward, her expression shifting to one of practiced concern. Edna, "We're so glad you invited us tonight," she began. "Graham and I have been worried about you." "Oh?" I said mildly, serving her a slice of apple pie. "Yes," she continued. "Living here, away from family. It's not a long-term solution. We've been talking to some specialists about your options." Graham nodded, his face earnest. "We want what's best for you, Mom." "What kind of specialists?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Just experts in elder care," Fallon said vaguely. "People who understand the challenges someone your age faces." I took a sip of coffee, then set down my cup deliberately. "You mean the kind of experts who could testify that I'm no longer competent to manage my own affairs?" The silence that followed was deafening. Graham's face registered confusion, but Fallon's momentarily froze before she recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said with a nervous laugh. "We're just concerned about your well-being." "Fallon," I said quietly, "I heard you and Carson discussing the conservatorship and how quickly you could sell my house once you had control of my affairs." Graham turned to his wife, bewilderment written across his face. "What is she talking about? We never discussed a conservatorship." Fallon's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculation beneath. Then she reached for Graham's hand. "Your mother must have misunderstood. We were discussing power of attorney for her protection. Sometimes elderly people get confused." "I'm not confused," I said firmly. "And I've taken steps to ensure I never will be at your mercy." From my purse, I withdrew a folder containing copies of all the legal documents Patricia had helped me prepare. I laid them on the table one by one. "This is the report from my geriatric assessment, confirming I'm fully competent. This is my durable power of attorney, naming Marlene as my representative. This is the trust I've established for my house, preventing its sale without my explicit consent." Graham stared at the documents, then at his wife. "Fallon, what's going on?" "Your wife has been planning to have me declared incompetent," I said gently. "She's been spreading stories about my declining mental health for years, laying the groundwork. The house was just the first step." "That's ridiculous," Fallon snapped, but her confident facade was crumbling. "Graham, don't listen to this nonsense. Your mother clearly needs help. She's paranoid, making wild accusations." "Stop," Graham said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "Just stop, Fallon." He turned to me, his eyes troubled. "Mom, is this true?" "Ask her about Carson," I suggested. "Ask her about the $800,000 she thought she could get for my house." Graham's face darkened as recognition dawned. The conversation in the office. That night when Mom came for dinner. "You said it was about refinancing our mortgage." Fallon's composure finally broke. "Because we need the money!" she burst out. "Your business is failing. We're drowning in debt, and she's sitting on a gold mine. That house is worth a fortune in today's market, and she's too selfish to help her own son." The naked greed in her voice seemed to shock even her. She pressed her lips together, realizing too late how she had exposed herself. Graham looked as if he'd been struck. "So it is true," he said softly. "You were planning to take control of Mom's affairs, to sell her home. For us," Fallon insisted. "For our future. She doesn't need that big house anymore. She doesn't need all that money just sitting in the bank." I felt a strange calm as I watched my daughter-in-law's true nature reveal itself. "How do you know about my money, Fallon?" she faltered. Everyone knows Walter left you well off." "No one knows exactly how much," I corrected her. "Not even Graham. Yet you mentioned money sitting in the bank. You've been investigating my finances." Graham pushed away from the table, standing abruptly. "I can't believe this. All these years. Was any of it real, Fallon? Or was it always about what you could get?" "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "Marriage is a partnership. I was trying to secure our financial future. By manipulating my mother? By lying to me? His voice cracked. By making me think Mom needed our help when really you were just after her assets? Fallon stood as well, her face flushed with anger. Fine, if you're going to side with her, go ahead. But don't come crying to me when we lose the house because you were too principled to do what needed to be done. With that, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Graham sank back into his chair, looking shell-shocked. Mom, I had no idea. I swear I thought we were trying to help you. I never would have agreed to what she was planning. I know, I said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand. You've always had a trusting heart. It's one of the things I love most about you. Tears welled in his eyes. I've been such a fool. No, I said firmly. You've been a son who wanted to believe the best of the woman he married. There's no shame in that. We talked for hours after that, Graham finally seeing the pattern of manipulation that had been hidden in plain sight. How Fallon had isolated him from his friends. How she'd controlled their finances while keeping him in the dark. How she'd undermined his confidence while making him dependent on her approval. What happens now? He asked eventually, exhaustion etched on his face. Now, I said, we both start fresh. And I have a proposal that might help us both. I told him about my decision to return to my house, with Marlene as my housemate. There's a separate apartment over the garage, I reminded him. It has its own entrance, its own small kitchen. It was meant to be a mother-in-law suite someday. You want me to move in there? He asked, surprised. If you need a place while you figure things out, I said carefully. No pressure, no strings. Just family supporting family, the way it should be. 6 months later, on a warm autumn afternoon, I sat on my front porch swing, watching the neighborhood children play across the street. Beside me, Marlene was engrossed in a mystery novel, occasionally reading passages aloud that she found particularly clever. The sound of a car in the driveway made us both look up. Graham emerged, carrying groceries. His face relaxed in a way it hadn't been for years. In the months since that fateful dinner, so much had changed. Graham had moved into the garage apartment temporarily, then decided to stay when he realized how much he enjoyed being close to home. The divorce from Fallon had been messy, but mercifully quick. Her fury at being exposed had made her careless, and Graham's attorney had secured a fair settlement. Most importantly, Graham and I had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. He'd found a job he enjoyed at a local community college, teaching business classes. I'd watched him gradually reclaim his confidence, his humor, his joy. As for me, I'd found an unexpected contentment in this new chapter of my life. Marlene and I had settled into an easy companionship, our different strengths complementing each other perfectly. The house that had once felt too empty now hummed with life again. I got that bread you like, Graham called as he climbed the porch steps, and fresh strawberries for dessert. Perfect, I smiled. Marlene made lemonade this morning. As we moved inside to prepare dinner together, a nightly ritual that had become precious to all of us, I caught sight of Walter's photo on the mantel. He seemed to be smiling at the scene before him, his wife, his son, and the family we had created not through blood, but through choice. That night, as I lay in bed reflecting on the journey of the past year, I thought about the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't about money or property, though Walter's foresight in setting aside that $500,000 had given me the freedom to stand my ground. It wasn't even about the house itself, though I was grateful to be back within its familiar walls. No, the real legacy was the strength I'd found within myself. The courage to say no, the wisdom to recognize true friendship, the resilience to begin again at 73. Fallon had called me greedy for wanting to keep what was mine. But in the end, The only real greed had been her desire to take what she hadn't earned. Not just my property, but my dignity, my autonomy, my very self. I drifted, off to sleep with a profound sense of peace. My home was secure, my son was healing, my future, for however many years I had left, was my own. And that, I realized, was the greatest wealth of all. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.